the audience is with you with understanding that you're in like a very like tough place right now, because you're like, you know, I have this interview set up, and you know, how can we not address this thing?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, you feeling like very vulnerable about even doing the documentary. You might as well see like where that kind of takes you in you know, obviously a dignified way. But me, like,
yeah.
I mean, I wish we were kind of like, are you recording this?
I am, man. I am.
Oh, you're recording this?
I am. Yeah.
Oh. Okay. This is episode 6, man. Like everything that I'm kind of talking to you about is episode 6, man.
You're rolling?
I am rolling.
All right. Just gonna pour some tea. Double green. So, final episode. This has been a pretty hard project to work on, to be honest. Had a lot of ups and downs. You know, I got into this project, or I guess I was interested in looking at Chinatown and learning more about it to get closer to my cultural heritage, but honestly, that's just been like part of the process now. You know, I haven't eaten this much Chinese food in Edmonton or spoken this much Cantonese on a daily basis in ever. Like, I've never done this before. And you know, I was visiting a seniors program last week at Assist to check out, you know, what it was like, and to talk to some of the seniors about what they think about Chinatown and how they're feeling about things. And just like all of a sudden, one of the aunties started to dissect my Chinese name, because they asked what my Chinese name was, and they started to write it out and like tell me, you know, what other words you could pair with my name to create different phrases. And you know, and then I connected with one of them through WhatsApp. She gave me her number because she wanted to see if I could help her fix her bike. So, you know, getting closer to my cultural heritage and speaking the language and meeting more, I guess, Chinese people here and connecting through our culture has just been part of the process now, and I'm super grateful to have that. It's one of the big things that Chinatown has given me, and it just feels really natural now. It feels really natural to walk in this area, knowing a bit of the history now and what's going on, to just have some natural conversations and hear different people's stories, which is really, really cool. It's not something I planned. It's not something I expected. I've also connected with a lot of Chinese artists here. You know, it's really nice having this connection, not to necessarily work together or anything, but just to meet and like talk about our experiences growing up and our relationship with our culture and our families, and obviously talk about our work and projects too. And yeah, it's cool, like meeting so many different people through this, and I'm just really excited to keep those connections alive and keep fostering, you know, more and more times to like hang out and just chill. You know, and through this, I've gotten a peek at some of the politics that happens with our Chinatown. I've gotten a look at some of the systemic, I guess, forces that Chinatown's up against, and you know, but I've also seen a lot of things that give me hope too, and I'm trying to lean into those relationships and those connections, and you know, sharing that struggle with other people. And building solidarity, that's I think been the best part of all this, truly. All right. All happy.
Very happy.
In a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, wait a second, some tea.
Oh,
You
thank
brought
you.
us tea. Need some, hope it's black tea, need some caffeine.
I love that this is like our caffeine, you know?
Yeah, it is.
It's
No,
actually
this'll
a lot
work,
like my
this'll
mom
work.
when she has caffeine. Like when she can't have tea after like 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
But not even like the lightest tea
Yeah,
possible.
yeah, I know. My
This is
grandma's
it.
always like that. She's like, no.
Yeah.
Like I'm drinking a milk tea at like 5 p.m. like a bubble tea, and she's like, no,
Exactly.
you're not gonna be able to
You're
sleep.
not gonna sleep all night. I'm just
I'm
like,
like,
I
it's
think
fine.
I am, but
Because I'm gonna sleep at 3.
Yeah.
You know. All right.
All right, 大家樂.
See
What are
what
we
we're gonna eat.
get?
What are you guys feeling like?
Mm.
So if you had to cut out noodles, rice, or bread.
Oh, okay. Off the
Bread.
Bread's fine.
Easily.
Good, you're Chinese.
What about
then. Emily was like straight up bread.
Oh yeah,
Like,
yeah. Of
you?
course.
Totally.
Oh,
Noodles,
so you're bread as well.
rice
Of course,
is like
of
a
course.
foundation.
Okay, bro.
Yeah.
But
I know we haven't ordered yet, but I always like to like set my chopsticks up.
Get
this is
ready.
the
Getting
best kind
ready.
of sound. Right? I love this sound. Like we should
I know,
just
me
like
too.
have that sound and everything.
Yeah.
You're picking this up, right?
I think so.
Is this going? Is this even happening right now? Or are we just like eating?
Ooh, should we do the deep fried squid?
Oh,
I haven't had that
Sean,
here.
It's 11 a.m., man.
Is that what you get?
What does that mean?
What does everyone get here though?
This
Specifically.
is the time to
I don't
eat
know.
like oily food, right? Not during the dinner time when it's just like.
Oh.
I don't think you're
Okay.
ever supposed to have oily food, but sure.
If you are to have it, that's Sean's
Yeah,
way of
yeah.
doing it. So that's
Oh
good.
man, I just saw.
You know
Oh,
what
yeah, you
y'all
wouldn't.
doing.
No. Your
What?
Cantonese is the best.
Yeah, but I don't know. 我哋要
This guy lived in Hong Kong, I
個
can't be.
炸魷魚、茄子，係魚香茄子，係啊鹹嘅，OK，冇問題。She wanted to make sure that you guys know that it's salty.
It has that
fish.
salty fish. Yeah,
冇
that's
人中
fine.
意食，
唔係我哋好中意食啊。
咪得我哋人食，
哦，係啊
西人唔食。
如果係係啊。
Thank you.
Episode 6, I made it.
I know. How's been the like process of all of it? It's been pretty long duration. So
Yeah.
how are you feeling?
You know, it's funny. So Sean and I went to see Creation last night, and what he was mentioning, like, kind of commenting on his journey. I know his was a lot longer. It was like 2 years, and his was an official like Indigenous residency, right? But what he said about it being like a roller coaster ride, like, resonated so hard with me when I was in the audience. I was like, yeah. And he was saying how sometimes you feel like on top of the world is how he described it, and he was like, you know, everything's just going for me. Maybe like all your relationships are all good, and like your ideas really like you love it. But then sometimes like it just kind of drops. And what he said is when it dropped, he really leaned into those relationships and that support network. And like to me, I feel like I never really had that until this project. It always sounded really cliche to me when people were like, yeah, my friends and family really
Community
brought
or
me up, or
whatever,
like
yeah.
community,
Yeah.
that they really, you know, brought me back to like the initial vision I had, or maybe like gave me other ideas or whatever. Yeah, but when I heard that last night, it like really resonated with me, because I think so many times in the last 6 months I like doubted myself really hard, thinking like, what's the point in all this? And I remember I was even in the car one time, like waiting for someone to show up for an interview, and it's just like a one-on-one thing, and I was literally sitting there like just slipping into this like darkness of like, no, wait, this is pointless. This is pointless.
So
'Cause, like,
relatable though, yeah.
Right? Like, because there's so many politics and things going on
Yeah.
with Chinatown, and like sitting there in my car with my camera, I was like, what am I really doing as an artist? Like, and that was like really early on. That was like in February, and so I didn't really know anything.
Yeah.
So when I
Right.
hear of all this, like all the politics in the media and people, you know, business closure and the pandemic affecting Chinatown, I was sitting there feeling so new to it all that I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm just trying to figure out like what's even happening, let alone how I can help, right?
Oh yeah.
I'm in Chinatown waiting for an interview, and I don't know, I'm feeling like a little struggle trying to do this work in Chinatown as an artist, because I realize that I don't have solutions to provide. I don't have actual, I guess, tangible skills to feel like I can make a difference in a political way. And it kind of feels like that's what Chinatown needs. I'm just trying to make art in Chinatown by talking to people and making this documentary. But it feels difficult, I guess. It feels like I feel like truly like an outsider and maybe like I don't belong. I don't know. That's just how I'm feeling right now. Maybe it's just cold and uncomfortable. I don't know. But yeah.
Bye. Oh,
Fast,
thank you.
I'm okay.
But I think community is very important, and I'm really glad that you're able to find that, because like almost every space that I am in, like I really depend on community. And I know that it sounds cliche, but really when it comes down to it, being an artist, as a creative person on these long-term projects, like how do you stay motivated and what inspires you, right? And often for me it comes down to the people, the work that, and even meeting you is that, you know, like we met through Chinatown Greetings. You had reached out to me, and that's why, like, you know, there's substance, and obviously it's come out to this documentary, but it takes a lot of like time for you to figure that out. But like Shawn and I knew that there was something there. You had a very genuine response to, you know, the market or the event that we had. We knew you had a story to tell, but it's not an easy journey, and you can't do it alone. Like I couldn't even do the markets or like my own artist work alone. It's just you experience burnout all the time because the process is so isolating, and you always question, especially as an artist, and maybe that's a systemic problem too. Is
Well,
that, like,
that's
like, always like, what do I have to contribute?
That's exactly.
I'm just an artist.
Right?
Like,
That's how I felt. That's exactly how I felt.
yeah.
So I mean, it's such a great lesson to realize that beyond all this, like very, I would even say, colonial type of infrastructure in which our systems are like premised around, what ultimately is like the thing, like obviously the individual passion, but those relationships are the things that hold it together, right?
Wow.
That looks so good.
So I've never ordered that before.
That looks so good.
This is the yin yang.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
The yin yang.
I'll have to try that one.
Yeah. Well,
And I find that with Chinatown work, what inspires me is that the relationships just keep growing. And you know, and I don't know, it's from both sides, making more relationships with folks in the community, but also from outside as an artist, because there's a lot of people that are actually kind of interested in my journey too.
Right.
And like people like you, like we kind of meet more people that want to share these experiences. And I think possibly because in some ways growing up, we've kind of ignored it for too long. So we have like this like calling in some ways to reconnect with what Chinatown has always meant to us, that, you know, even in some cases for me, like I have a lot of regret that I have not been contributing to the community or even like coming to Chinatown as much when I was younger.
That's how I felt,
And it's like sad, but like finally at this like point where there's like a threat of like cultural erasure and like displacement, then you're like, oh man, it's like I just feel like there's like we all probably feel like we could have done more. I do feel I'm an optimist, but I feel like there's a lot of folks out there who do care, and it's growing.
This guy's smiling because he's the
most
pessimist.
I'm not a pessimist.
Why are you in Chinatown Greetings?
I'm not a pessimist. I'm just.
Shawn is a healthy dose of cynicism that I've
exactly.
needed throughout this project.
But there is also a reason by design, and I feel like this idea that like you should feel guilt because you didn't like contribute is actually part of the systemic erasure of not just us and our culture, but like this like grounded foundation that like our systems care more about what we can bring to value and benefit the society over community relationships. Period. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think because there's only so much capacity in what individually we can do, and even as like small collectives, but there's so many problems to solve or work to be done. Sometimes it's hard, I guess, to like, where do I focus my energy for this week? Even just this week, right? Like, what do I try to amplify? What do I try to build relationships on? What do I try to further my own, you know, artistic development on with Chinatown, let's say, right? But I think I'm just trying to remind myself that it's a long-term thing. It's to be sustainable. You need to be healthy. You need to take a step back sometimes. You do need to like, oh, I can't get involved in this thing because if I do, I know I'm gonna lose energy and steam on this other thing that I'm really passionate about, right?
But what's more important than anything else and makes all those things possible is people, right? And so if we can reframe and focus back on how do we build good relationships, and how do we have better understanding of what shared space or coexistence is that will benefit not just the space that we're at, but also like model ways of things that we haven't ever explored as a community, right? So
when the opportunity arose to meet and chat with Will Maurer, an outreach worker at the Bissell Center, one of the many social agencies located in Chinatown, I knew I couldn't turn it down. I met up with Will for lunch to chat about his experiences as an outreach worker in the area and also as someone who's been on a journey of reconnecting with his culture. All right, so we're rolling, Jose? Sweet. So Will, you mind just telling me who you are and what you do?
Yeah, for sure. My name's William Cardinal Maurer, and I am Métis from Wolf Lake Métis Settlement, which is originally 3 hours northeast of Edmonton. It's not a settlement anymore. It was disbanded at one point. So a bunch of my family, they kind of live in like the Bonnyville, Cold Lake, Lac La Biche area. I currently live here in Edmonton, Amisquichy Waskegon in Cree. It means Beaver Hills House. And I've lived here for 12 years now. I've been working with Edmonton's inner city community for 10 of those years. So I've been with the Bissell now for 3 years. Started at the Expo Center and then moved over to Edmonton Convention Center and then their community space. And now I'm currently a street outreach worker here in the Boyle-Macaulay Chinatown community.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you mind telling me a bit about what a street outreach worker does?
Yeah. So as a street outreach worker, we primarily deal with overdoses. They kind of take up a lot of our time. We're currently in the height of an opioid poisoning, a drug poisoning epidemic. And it's the worst it's ever been. It's the worst the city has ever seen. And so a primary part of my job is to carry naloxone. And it's an opioid reversal agent. And so just kind of walking around through the Chinatown community, just checking on folks, making sure if they're on the ground, if they looks like they're sleeping, maybe it could be an overdose. We just go and make sure that they're breathing. And another part of the job is to hand out harm reduction supplies. Basically, it means harm reduction is people are going to use drugs, whether we want them to or not. It's not an issue of morality. And it's like they might as well be safe using them. My thing is like dead people can't recover. So many times when it comes to addiction, people just want to focus on recovery and sobriety, and they want the people like to get it fast. But for some people, recovery looks a lot different than sobriety. Some of the people that I work with, if they were to go sober, it would probably kill them in the end, right? And so it's just a matter of navigating each person case by case, making sure they're safe and making sure they're cared for, and then going from there, and kind of seeing from there like what kind of help that they need. And then the third part, and a very important part, is also just being a connection, a bridge to the businesses here in the neighborhood, and being an advocate and kind of being that person to kind of communicate between the two communities,
Is that officially part of your role, or do you find it's
No. Yeah, when we first started the street outreach team, that was a major part of the program, was to connect with businesses and to be a presence in the Chinatown community and be around in cases of to de-escalate high risk situations, and again to respond to overdoses. And to distribute naloxone to businesses, because again, like overdoses happen outside of a lot of them, right? And so even through last summer, we were just going to businesses and teaching them about harm reduction and naloxone. And even if you don't want to use the naloxone kit, having it with you, if in the event of an overdose, somebody around will use it or will know how to use it, right?
Right, it's just having it available.
Yeah. Like in my 1 year doing outreach, I personally responded to around 120 overdoses myself, in this full year.
Wow.
And before that, like that program didn't exist. You know what I mean? So it just kind of shows you how immediately impactful like the outreach team had on the community, and just at the bare minimum saving lives. You know what I mean? Like we can deal with all of those other issues later. Like at the bare minimum, let's just keep them alive, long enough for us to like to help them. We've gotten to know the firemen like on a first name basis because we're seeing them multiple times a day per overdose. And they were telling us like, yeah, before we existed, you know, sometimes they would just be alone in an alley with like one or two of them without any help, you know, or without anybody to help or assist them. And so they've also recognized the importance and the need for the outreach team. Yeah.
Is that why they're called the fire daddies?
Yeah, the fire daddies. Yeah, no, long story there. Yeah.
Relatively recently in your life, have you kind of put a proactive effort on getting closer to the Indigenous side of your life, your culture, and your mom, right? How's that journey been, and also how does this community work in Chinatown with the Bissell Center like relate to that?
Okay.
Yeah.
So for a large part of my life, like I was a very like evangelical Christian, and I was kind of like kept away from my culture and kind of kept away from like ceremony and like tradition, and so I didn't grow up in it. It wasn't until I graduated high school, moved out of home, came to Edmonton, started discovering things on my own, you know, started my own journey. There's always been a very large part of me missing my entire life. And it wasn't until I started reconnecting with my culture that I realized like that's what was missing, was ceremony, you know, was just learning more about like the traditional ways of, you know, like the Métis and like the Cree people and practicing like smudging and just starting. And like, you know, again, as a Christian, I used to pray every day, right? And it was just like, but it was just a verbal prayer, you know, whereas now that I'm connecting more with my culture, I pray with smudge and sweetgrass, you know, and it's and I feel a lot more comfortable practicing that type of prayer, you know, and it's a lot more it comes a lot more natural to me, you know, and when I participate in it, you know, I'm reminded there's like this sense of comfort, overwhelming sense of belonging and purpose, where, you know, like my ancestors, like they were waiting for me to kind of get to this point in my life where I truly kind of embraced that. Because again, like it's definitely like a dying thing. You know what I mean? Like a lot of that history and a lot of that knowledge has been destroyed, and so the fact that I can still just carry a little piece of that and carry that forward is like very special and like very sacred. So, and then working with the Bissell Center, a large, like I would say about 60 to 70% of our homeless community, they're Indigenous. You know, and so being a visibly Indigenous man, working within the inner city, practicing ceremony, practicing culture, there's like me being Native, going down on the street talking to other Natives. There's barriers that are just gone already, you know, and I feel like I can get through to them a lot better, you know, as an Indigenous person, and they know. When they talk to me, their needs and their concerns, they'll be listened to, you know, and they'll be heard, right? Versus just brushed off, you know, or just kind of like whatever.
Or if you're not knowledgeable about it, right? They don't need to explain anything.
No.
Yeah.
No.
You understand.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
I relate to that in a lot of ways because the kind of spark for me, even being curious about Chinatown, was my desire to learn more about my culture, being born here. I think similarly I pushed, I don't know if it was intentional or it just happened naturally because of who you're surrounded by or the institutions that you're in, but I did push away, you know, my Hong Kong Chinese side of my life. And now coming into Chinatown, I thought that it would be very like, I had to be very intentional, like, okay, I gotta speak the language, I gotta eat the food, I gotta learn how to cook the food. But honestly, like 6 months into making this project, it's felt way more natural than I thought it'd be, and it's just now part of the process. So I wonder for you, has it felt like you had to force it, or has it felt more natural? I'm curious.
I grew up in like a very white dominant like community, you know, and then like my mom like grew up in that same culture, right? And so my mom grew up in a time where, you know, she wasn't allowed to be Indigenous, you know, where it was easier to hide it just to not cause trouble, right? And now for me, like she did her best, and like she did speak like a little bit of Cree to me, you know, there was like a little bit of that cultural influence, but it wasn't until like I really started discovering things on my own. For me, it was not so much it was more so like, it was just like, it's hard to come by. like throughout history, they did a really good job at erasing, you know, a lot of things. And so for Indigenous people, it's like really tough to reconnect because it almost doesn't exist anymore. You know what I mean? And the avenues that they do exist, they're sometimes really hard to navigate. You know what I mean? Like, and I think about, like, I don't know, just like to kind of put it into perspective. So I'll meet somebody from Germany, and if I wanted to learn about German culture, you know, I could meet somebody from Germany, and I could go to Germany, and I could be with the German people, and I can be with the German culture, and it's there with the German food, and it's around me, you know. And I meet somebody, you know, like from Egypt, you know, and if I want to learn about Egyptian culture, I can go with them to Egypt, and I can be with the people, and I can be with the culture, and I can be, you know. But if I wanted to learn about, like, if let's say somebody wants to learn about Indigenous people, you know, it's like, well, I can take you to the RAM, I can take you to the Royal Alberta Museum, you know, at the minimum, and then it's just like trying to navigate, where do you go from there?
Yeah, I see what you mean.
You know?
There is no established healthy living culture left. It's just these pockets,
it's
right?
Pockets,
of people trying to grasp
at whatever is left
and hold on. And at the same time, I can see what you're saying. When you do, when you can eventually maybe access those communities and they're grasping it, there's also issues of trauma, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Of,
so many elders practice so many different ceremonies in so many different ways, and been hurt by so many different things, and so in return, you're not even getting like the full experience. You know what I mean? They did everything they could to eliminate it, and the fact that some of it still exists to this day is a miracle. So like that in itself is powerful. Like I am the grandchildren of like the Indigenous people that they failed to remove. You know, I'm a direct result. I'm a direct result of, you know, like of somebody before me who loved me so much that I'm here. You know, that they willed me into existence. You know, through so much opposition. You know,
they believed in you.
They did. They knew.
And this space is forever evolving. You know, that's something I've learned. It's constantly in flux. There's so many dynamics and factors at play here. And what I took away is that Chinatown is really about the people, you know, and it's for everyone. I think Chinatown, even as a label, is very exclusionary. Like, it's for everyone, and it's a part of the city that I think people should care more about, because it's not on an island, you know, it's part of Edmonton, it's part of this land. And I was born and raised here, but I've never seen a more perfectly unique and organic place where relationships can be built. I spoke about that a little bit earlier, but I can't think of anywhere else in the city where you have this kind of dynamic, where you have so many cultural businesses, community members, residents.
So many moving parts,
and they're all meshing and intertwined. The system wants us to be in a really hostile, tense situation, so that this part of the city continues being somewhere where they can keep dumping their problems. But I think if we can foster that energy and move forward with, like, slowly with some momentum of building these relationships, there's so much potential.
Because like everybody thinks it's going to be from the top down, right? But it's like it's going to be from the bottom up, and it's always been that way, especially when it comes to like systemic issues like we find here. And so as long as you have the little guys doing the grunt work on the ground, you know, like they'll never defeat, you know, they can't defeat us, they can't get rid of us, you know.
Let's talk about the Chinese youth, Indigenous youth conference a little bit. Like, that was beautiful.
That's where I'm getting all my energy from.
It came at a time, I think, that we really needed to see that, and came at a time where, you know, I think the conversations that were had, to me, from that youth demographic, being in Chinatown and doing that, and Lan kind of leading some of that work too, from like an elder perspective, was just so beautiful. And the presence by the community at the festival, especially like on Friday, was beautiful.
Now, more than ever, it is the time to foster empathy and compassion for those with whom we share the land. We recognize that even in the midst of this tragedy, other communities are grieving as well. We also mourn the unmarked graves of children found at Blue Quills Residential School on Saddle Lake Cree Nation, and the thousands of unmarked graves discovered throughout Canada, that show the most destructive part of our nation's history of colonialism and racism. All of our communities want to build a space that is safe for everyone, not only from the violence we experienced this past week, but also from racism and discrimination between our communities. This will only happen by building relationships and working together with the city government, people experiencing homelessness, the organizations that serve them, and most importantly, with Indigenous communities.
It was the first time I've ever seen like any sort of like specifically Indigenous and Chinese celebration in Edmonton, like those two groups.
Yeah, two of the biggest groups that actually live in Chinatown.
True. And then the media attention too. I think that always has, like, when you shine a light on those things, it does help change a narrative or shift it a little bit, right? At a time where we really needed that.
I understand that in both the experiences of Chinatown and reserves, Chief Joseph was a very famous
You know, it's really about the people, it's really about the community, and this project has really challenged me, challenged my perceptions about culture, about class, about art, about activism, about politics, and I have so much to be grateful for. And I just want to be here, you know? There's so much work to do. There's so much work that I still want to do. And I feel like this is just the beginning. Yeah, I want to bring more folks into this space and just support in whatever way I can. But yeah, for now, let's enjoy some beef and broccoli. Let's enjoy some fried rice. And I hope to see you here soon.
Thank you.